My name is Pati Jinich. I'm a Mexican chef, TV host, and cookbook author. Well, I'm from Mexico City. I come from a home that had 4 sisters, and food was always the center of our family life and of our social life. And as you know, Mexico City is an incredible place full of delicious food from all over the country, very rich in culture and diversity. And I had a very happy childhood in Mexico. Being a Latina is who I am, is what I represent, is what I am, is I always felt very strongly about my Mexicanness growing up in Mexico City, but I think I felt it even stronger after I moved to the US. And I moved to Texas, where I lived with my husband for a couple of years, and I started running into a lot of myths and preconceptions about what Mexicans are, what we look like, what we eat, who we are, and I started realizing that even though we're so close, the US from Mexico, there were so many misunderstandings. And I trained in political science. I wanted to be an academic, and I did a lot of political analyses. And after many years, and after doing a master's and working in a think tank, I realized that by way of food, I was able to show who we are and how much we enrich not only our country, but any other country that we may be in. When I look at it in hindsight, it seems like a very natural path, even though at the time it was a very tough decision. Now, I wasn't in politics. I wanted to be an academic. So I did train in political science, but focused on history, on how to strengthen democratic institutions and how to connect and build bridges between countries and migrant communities. So my work was more academic. But after I switched careers and decided to resign, I worked at a policy research center for a couple of years and decided to go into cooking, and I went to cooking school. And I thought at the time that it was a very drastic, radical choice. It was very hard to make that choice. But once I did it, I never looked back. And after so many years, I realized that I've come full circle, because I've used so many of the techniques and tools that I learned when I was studying social sciences and history. To give you an example, I'm history obsessed. I learned a lot about how to write academic papers and how to do really thorough research. And so I find that when I'm sharing recipes and when I'm sharing stories and the history of a people and culture behind food, it's very important to do right by history and to not only share recipes with people, but to empower them, not only with the food they can make, but also with the stories they can learn. So when people bring these foods from all over Mexico and Latin America into their kitchen, they're not only enriching their life with more diverse and delicious foods, but they're enriching their life with cultures and cuisines and stories, and they're bringing the Americas into their kitchen. So you're learning so much. It's very empowering. So I do like to refer to food as a soft power, but sometimes I find that a soft power is much more powerful and effective than the hard power of politics, because with soft power you're able to build bridges in a more subtle but sometimes stronger way. Well, of course, being Mexican, and of course being a woman, and of course having the accent. And it was very hard for me to start a TV series in the mainstream. And to have a Mexican woman with a very strong Mexican accent try to talk to a mainstream audience. And even though in the beginning I feel like there was a lot of resistance and it was very hard for me to make it happen, I feel that now, more than a decade after, my series is very appreciated for being true and authentic, and for not having given up on the things that I valued the most, which is do right by my heritage and do right by where I come from, and stick to my accent. Now people recognize me for my accent, which is a funny and cute thing. In Mexico, women rule the kitchen. Women are the ones who nurture, typically the ones who cook, the ones who care for, the ones who go shop, who chop, who cook, who, do all of the home nurturing for the family. It is the men who have, or who earned earlier on, the right to wear chef's coats. So it was women like as cooks, but not as chefs. But I feel like even though it's pronounced in Mexico and Latin America, it's the same all over the world. So you see now shows and competitions saying, oh, let's see who the best female chef is. And for a lot of women, it's like, you don't have to separate us. Just judge who the best chef is. So there is that machismo in Mexico, but of course there's a different kind of machismo also here in the US. I started Pati's Mexican Table trying to show who Mexico was and who we Mexicans were to Americans. And I realized as the years went on that we don't even know who we are. We don't even know our different regions or different cultures or different people, because Mexicans are not a single Mexican. There's the Mayans in Yucatan. There's just so many different indigenous pillars all over the country. The Totonacas and the Aztecs and, and today the Yaqui in the north. And there's just so many different pillars of origin that made for a different mestizaje. Even we had the Spanish there for 300 years. It's not like they immediately turned everything into one Mexicanness. There's all the regional differences. And a fascinating thing is how these regional Mexican evolution continues to evolve north of the border, which I think is fascinating and beautiful and enriching. Well, two things I think I would share as advice. One is, if there's something that you want to do, that you love, that you're passionate for, just jump and try. There's going to be so many people, including yourself, telling you to be careful, to compare, to do a lot of research to see what's the competition, what are the risks, what are the obstacles. And too many times I feel like fear and too much research can lead you to freezing on your tracks and not trying something new. And there's so much to say about just trying and doing, because things that you think are going to be so difficult, which they very well may be, once you take a step, you realize, that there's different paths that you didn't even know existed before. So I think my main advice is to jump and try and not stay in the limbo of I don't know what it's gonna be like. Because once you make a decision and once you go, if it was the wrong thing to do, then you go in a different route. And the other thing, which I think is very important, is to know what things to never put on the negotiating table. And typically those things are the things that people are asking you to change, the things that you feel vulnerable for, the things that you feel embarrassed about, the things that you feel are your weak spot. And those things, like for me, it was my accent, no? Those are the things that you're gonna be recognized for. So I had a lot of pressure when I switched careers to not do Mexican food, because it was considered by, the people in the media world. Then it was considered to be too ethnic, too niche, and I stood my ground, and I wanted to focus on Mexican and not change my accent and not change my ways. And 10 years later, I feel like I'm so proud about that and staying true to myself, and that's what I would advise. Well, I think that there's so much for me to do. There's so much more that I can do. I do think that I would be a role model for my younger self, which I am proud of. But I do think I have a very long way to go to do much more work.